Welcome to the AAAi podcast. I'm Bridget McCormick, the CEO and president of the American Arbitration Association.
And I'm Zach Abramowitz, founder of Killer Whale Strategies and investor in disruptive legal startups. The AAAi podcast tells the story of the American Arbitration Association's AI journey. We discuss emerging trends in artificial intelligence with movers and shakers inside AAA, as well as with key influencers in the broader legal AI ecosystem.
So welcome back to episode 7 of the AAAi podcast. I'm very excited about today's topic and guests. We've so far over the course of the year had an opportunity to meet with and speak to innovators inside the American Arbitration Association, as well as legal technology entrepreneurs, and most recently law firm partners, all of whom are changing the way lawyers practice law and resolve disputes. But one group of folks we have not spoken to are perhaps the most critical for AI taking hold in the legal industry, and those are the purchasers of legal services themselves, in-house counsel. So in today's episode, we have a great opportunity to speak with Darth, Vaughn, and Whitney Stefko Dover. Darth and Whitney are lawyers at the Ford Motor Company. I'm going to let them introduce themselves in just a minute. And both Darth and Whitney are sought after for their insight and thought leadership on how to build a forward-looking legal department and leverage AI. And Ford has really become known throughout the legal industry as one of the most cutting-edge legal departments. Both Bridget and I have a little bit of insider insight on that, but we can tell you it's true. Like they're quite ahead. So we're very excited to have you both. Can you give us, I guess, starting with you, Whitney, and then Darth, tell us a little bit about how the two of you moved from litigators at the same firm ultimately to in-house innovators inside Ford, and tell us about your positions.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks so much, Zach and Justice McCormick. It's so great to be here. So as you said, Darth and I did cross over many moons ago at the same law firm. We were both trial counsel practicing in Southern California. I had a little bit of an opposite trajectory from Darth. I went right from law school into law firm life, thought that I wanted to be on the partnership track, but quickly realized that there was very little innovation happening in law firm world, and ultimately decided to leave the legal industry entirely. I spent a few years playing in some tech startups in the e-commerce space, then moved into a very wild adventure in cryptocurrency. After fully vetting that my husband and I probably shouldn't be in a business endeavor together, I somehow got pulled, somewhat kicking and screaming, back into the legal industry by no other than Darth Vaughn, more in kind of that tech capacity. Most of what I'd been doing in sort of these tech startups and certainly in crypto revolved around data, predictive algorithms, understanding what was happening, future facing based on historically what had transpired. And there was a lot of applicability of that type of strategy in legal, and I didn't see a lot of people really doing that. So had a few very fun projects that sort of surrounded data visuals, building, stories with data, and quickly realized that there was an immense opportunity having practiced previously and also with this kind of technological backdrop to really merge the two functions and sort of operate in this new and exciting space of ops and innovation.
Darth, you joined Ford even before Whitney did.
I did. I've been with Ford a little more than 4 years now. So prior to joining Ford, I was, to Whitney's earlier comment, working in Southern California as a trial attorney, trying cases for Ford and other corporate clients, kind of in high stakes litigation. But in a prior life, I was actually in the tech industry. Law was a second career for me. Initially, when I got out of school, I went and worked for a company called Accenture, and we were providing tech solutions to Fortune 500 companies. And it seemed like a good idea to become a lawyer at some point. So I moved from New York to Southern California, to Los Angeles, went to the University of Southern California for law school. And I naively thought when I finished law school and went into the legal industry that we would be on the bleeding edge of kind of data analytics because, we basically bill 6 minutes at a time. And I was horrified kind of at how lawyers were working at that point in time. Conservatively, I thought we were probably 10, 15 years behind corporate America in terms of applying, process and technology to the way we worked. And I saw a, great opportunity to do that. So when a former general counsel for Ford reached out to me in 2018 and started talking to me about artificial intelligence, worked on a couple of projects, and then found myself fielding an offer from Ford that I couldn't refuse. And I love the company and I love the people, so I made the decision to join Ford.
It's great to have you guys and great to see you both. I feel like I've put both Zach and Whitney on the spot many times, so it's great that you're willing to do it again. I'm sorry, Darth and Zach, I do you every day basically, but Darth and Whitney, I've called on them both in so many different contexts. Whitney most recently at Whipple, I was leading a discussion on AI and legal, and it was a so-called fishbowl discussion where people are supposed to join from the audience and step up to the microphone and just become part of the conversation. And I made Whitney be our first joiner, whether she wanted to or not. So it's great to have you guys both. And like Zach said, we both know a little bit about what you're up to, but I don't think our listeners do. What's your team like at Ford, and how do you two divide your time between being lawyers and doing ops and the other innovative work that you do? What does your day-to-day look like? What does your team look like? What's your mandate?
Want to start, Whitney?
Sure, yeah. I think maybe I'll start with the team aspect, because I am very much a believer that we run a people-first operation. So we are a team in terms of our ops space of, I believe, just around 10 now on kind of a global scale. Wow. We support not only our legal team, but also a greater policy infrastructure. So government affairs, safety, our physical security team, as well as, I know I'm forgetting someone here, privacy. So it's a pretty big mandate, and certainly an exciting time to be in the space of innovation work at any kind. I think our team is comprised more broadly of a lot of folks who are interested in change, but I think, as most humans are, a little bit shy to embrace it sometimes as quickly as some of us who are a little bit more comfortable in this space want folks to be embracing change. But it's an exciting time, and I think we have an all-star cast when we start thinking about the opportunities that sort of lay before us and what it is that is available for us to create when we start thinking about a next generation policy team. In terms of our day-to-day, I don't think that there's any day that looks the same. We have a very big global presence, and as a result, a pretty big component of our jobs is a virtual component, connecting with folks, whether it's via meetings or in collaborative workspaces. And so that also lends an interesting aspect to innovation and how we're thinking about building culture around innovation. And I think, I won't speak for Darth, but at least for me, most of my job now is operations and innovation and not a lot of lawyering, which for me is a better spectrum. I think that's more what I was interested in doing at this stage. But certainly has a fair bit of legal analysis still as a big part of it, largely centered around the fact that one of our biggest clients are our legal department, and certainly how they operate is always top of mind when we start to think about ways that we are evolving and disrupting and changing in those work streams.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, and I think Darth was maybe a pioneer in this respect. There have been legal operations professionals at legal departments, and I think there have even been top lawyers who took on some of the innovation responsibility, but titles are created for a reason. And I know your title today has built upon what it was when you originally started at Ford, Darth, which is Associate General Counsel and Managing Director, Policy and Legal Operations. And you've always sort of had, even as you were innovating and thinking about new ways in which law was practiced and legal services were delivered, you've always maintained one foot, in actually still continuing to be an attorney, as your title today suggests. And I think that's again, it's something I think that you in a way have pioneered. What's the advantage of doing that, and how do you manage those different responsibilities?
Yeah, well, thanks. I don't know that I pioneered it. I know a lot of people in legal ops that had worked primarily as lawyers throughout their career. I don't know how many maintain it, just because the demands are so high. I find that continuing to practice, one, I consider myself kind of a lawyer first. That's what I do on my day to day. But when you're the end user, when you are developing solutions that directly impact the way you work, I think it creates a little different relationship and approach. So for me, I always talk about getting your hands dirty with the technology or the work or something to that extent. Uh, I want to continue to practice because ultimately I think it allows us to create solutions that hit closer to home. Indirectly, I do think, and I don't really like this, but I do think continuing to practice lends some credibility with skeptical lawyers who otherwise might dismiss you as just an ops professional. And I think that's unfortunate, but it's a reality of kind of where we are in terms of a mindset in the industry. I don't think you need to be a lawyer to be an excellent ops person, but I do think it helps and it lends you a little bit of credibility.
It lends credibility, and there is such an adoption challenge with AI. And I wonder if that's like specific to legal or that's true in like other spaces. I mean, I don't know that like, do salespeople care, that AI is being driven by someone who wasn't a salesperson in the same way? But I think there is like a kind of like fraternity within legal that where I think what you're saying maybe holds more true.
Well, we're protective, right? We're protective of our self-regulated industry to some extent. And that's because there's a high bar to get in and people want to maintain that high bar and that quality. But also people are, whether you're a lawyer or not, people are uncomfortable with AI because they incorrectly assume it's somehow going to impact the amount of work that they're going to get. And I'm one of the people who think that it's going to create more work than it's going to take away. I just think the volume and velocity of everything is exponentially increasing. And I think your inability to quickly adopt and adapt to this, quickly changing environment potentially is going to kind of put you behind the eight ball. I really see a world in the very near future where just the volume of stuff we're going to be dealing with on a day-to-day basis requires us to embrace these tools just to provide legal services.
Yeah, I say that to lawyers often, which is I've got good news and bad news. The good news is AI is not going to replace your job. And the bad news is AI is not going to replace your job. You're gonna be just as busy as you were.
Or even busier. I mean, I think we have more work with email now than we did before email, right? I just think the volume of stuff that we are dealing with on a day-to-day basis continues to increase. And as this technology becomes ubiquitous, there's no indication that would stop. From the litigation standpoint, if it's easier to spin up a complaint, you're going to see more complaints. If there's less friction from, individuals bringing a legal action, you're going to see more of it. So that's going to, in kind, force us to respond and maintain pace with the technological innovations that the industry demands.
I think there's just more legal issues than there's ever been before, too. Like when you think about data privacy and how much that has blossomed in the last decade as well, with just our increasingly digital world and how many different technologies we have access to and what's happening on the back end and the black box issue and, just data in general. I think that we are already seeing that increase. I think that a lot of what we see just industry-wide is sort of a struggle to keep up and maintain current with even sort of legal landscape risk mitigation. You have these super niche subject matter experts because that is what is required with how robust a lot of this has become with technological evolution. And so not only from, volume and velocity of complaints and paperwork and a variety of other things, but just the regulatory landscape and what it actually looks like from a legality standpoint is becoming increasingly more complex as well.
I feel like you can think of it as protectionism, or fraternity might be a slightly nicer word, Zach. But there's, lots of reasons why lawyers are, at least some of them, are slower to adopt to this adapt to and adopt the technology both. And one of them I hear a lot when I'm speaking with lawyers is that they are really, they sincerely don't believe that the technology has a role to play for what they do because everything we do is so bespoke. They'll say every single legal transaction is so unique that there's no role for AI technology, which always cracks me up because I think well, then how do we teach law students? What is, if every single case is bespoke, how do we have law schools? How does that work? How do we ever teach people what the law is? But maybe you guys can help a little with demystifying that. I mean, I'm sure you have heard that maybe even from some of your, the people you work with closely. I have no idea. But how do you think, or how can you explain to people why the technology can be useful in a profession where people like to think that their individual service is the thing, right? The thing that people want and pay for.
Yeah, we do hear that a lot, that I'm unique, and you are unique just like everyone else. So I think if you went and mapped what we did, and we do this, you would find that almost every single legal issue we deal with, even though they're complex, 75% of the process is the same. And then you have some subject matter expertise for the remaining 25%. And that subject matter expertise is important, and those nuances are extremely important. But it doesn't, negate the fact that still 75% of what you were doing involves some type of common process, whether it's intaking the information, how you're processing the information, how you're outputting the information. And from that standpoint, you can begin to streamline those core activities where there's overlap, and get efficiencies out of kind of that 75% core that we look at. We like to believe we're, I'm very special, and I think rightfully so, lawyers have earned much of what they have. But there's also the misconception that the machine won't ever be able to do what I'm able to do. We've seen instances where truly unique individuals, chess masters, go masters, get displaced by the machine. And I'm by no means advocating that the machine will replace us, but to think it can't enhance you or augment what you're currently doing to make you even better at it, I just think is myopic and short-sighted. We use machines every day. You had a legal pad. There's a reason you have a laptop now. For now, AI is a tool that allows you to be better and faster and deliver higher quality work. And it would behoove you to embrace it because your competition is embracing it. We're seeing it, and they're able to deliver quality legal services in a shorter time and at a more optimized price point.
Yeah, and I want to come back to that point that you just made, Darth, about AlphaGo and AlphaZero in chess, and what it means for attorneys and how they valued themselves up until now. But I think it's important that people know, you started at Ford, as you mentioned, 4 years ago. So before the launch of large language models, and what many know as generative AI, how would you describe not the difference between the new models and older models of AI, but in terms of how you've seen the lawyers both at Ford, but more generally, how have appetites and attitudes changed? What questions are you seeing asked that weren't asked before? What is the overall posture of lawyer towards AI, pun intended?
Yeah, well, when we first started to dip our toe in this, I was actually outside counsel, and I'll say 2018, it was my opinion that what was commercially available wasn't commercially viable for what we did, and that it probably wasn't worth the investment, although there were things that you could do using traditional machine learning. But at that point, the technology hadn't caught up with the words, and the words are what we do. And what we've seen here over the last 2 years is that with the evolution of generative AI and the increasing size of the LLMs and the computational power, the technology has finally caught up with the words. And we are seeing advances like every 6 months now. So I understand why lawyers are skeptical, because for a decade, everyone was running around being like, oh, I have this great new technology that's going to change your life. And it wasn't good, and it wasn't fit for purpose, and it was expensive. And even onboarding it and training it was such an obstacle that it just wasn't worth it to make the investment. Here, what you can get is almost immediate ROI. In a simplified way that I think speaks to the end user in ways that prior generations of this type of technology didn't. It is the first time that I've seen hardcore skeptical people, once they see a demo, start to get their hands on it, the light bulb goes off. And for 10 years, they're saying it doesn't work. And they're like, oh, wow, it actually works. I see what we can do with this, and this is useful. So I think we're just, the penultimate step from this being ubiquitous in just about everything we do. But up until a couple of years ago, the technology hadn't caught up with the words. And now, not only has it caught up, we are moving at a pace that is amazing. Scary in some ways, but exciting.
The uneven distribution of AI knowledge across the legal profession is something that feels to me like a bit of a barrier to widespread adoption. And when I talk to you two, I think, oh, the in-house counsel teams are going to lead us into the future because they're, so far ahead of us on figuring out use cases and adoption. And of course, you have all this, leverage with your law firm partners. But I don't know, Whitney, is it your sense that other in-house teams are where Ford is or somewhere else along the path? What's your sense of in-house teams kind of more generally?
Well, to be clear, Ford is leading in everything always. So that is not a misnomer when we start to think about exactly your first analysis. But I think we have the power of the purse. And I think that is a very powerful point of leverage, as Darth mentioned. I do think that there's different opportunities when we start to think about incentives in-house as well. We really have limited bandwidth, limited resources, and are trying to do more with less, truly more than others in the industry. And so I think because of that, there's an opportunity that incentivizes innovation in a different way, especially innovation, as Darth mentioned, that has such a high and immediate ROI. I do think that there is sort of, on the same teams, there is a little bit more risk aversion as well. And so it's an interesting dynamic of trying to really make sure that there's a balance between, yes, this is high ROI. Yes, this allows us to do more with less, but also being able to educate users enough through that change management curve so that there's less aversion to this change, more adoption and more understanding of what's happening behind the curtain. I think another big change too, just to go back to your earlier question, Zach, before 2018 and kind of prior to that, because it was so much more challenging to extract data, use data, build algorithms, interact in this traditional machine learning environment, I actually think there was less of a black box problem because it forced people to really be in this life cycle of kind of tech evolution. And even if ultimately the end product was not exactly getting you what you wanted, you still had an understanding of the time and effort it took to get from point A to point Z. Now we click a button and you are sped through sort of this life cycle. And so inherently that is incredible for ROI, but I think it also sometimes increases a little bit of the skepticism around what is happening because that black box has become even more opaque than truly what it was before. And so I think that you have a healthy population in-house that is very concerned about that as well and very concerned about what that looks like in terms of adoption and progress in this space. So I think there are opportunities for in-house teams to certainly lead this endeavor, but I think it's still a big challenge around education and understanding how the technology works in order to actually be able to utilize the tech in the way that it's intended and really realize the net gain from this type of innovation.
So in other words, with an in-house audience, the power of AI is a double-edged sword. More powerful, so certainly gets more attention, but more powerful. So it also raises a lot more questions for people who, even perhaps more than outside counsel, have to sort of by nature be a little bit more concerned with risk.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I want to go back, to Darth's point before about, we talked about AlphaZero and AlphaGo and lawyers, sort of saying what we do is bespoke and can't possibly replicate it with technology. I think that, one of the things, and, Bridget and I have discussed this quite a bit. One of the things that I think is really challenging for a lot of attorneys right now is that they've sort of been used to saying, well, it does sort of, AI or technology very broadly can replicate some of the grunt work, but like the high critical thinking, that's what you're paying me for. You're paying me and I think more true from outside counsel, but maybe true at an in-house counsel level as well. You're paying me not to draft a memo or to draft a contract. What you're paying me to do is sit back in my seat and brood and think through all these issues. And that thinking takes time. Like, smash cut to the most recent model released by OpenAI, and it is thinking and doing that very exact brooding work that lawyers have always felt, well, that will be immune from AI. And like, the AI is specifically good at it and better in the respect that it can churn out those highly creative ideas. I mean, we recently spoke with Adam Unikowski about, who's a Supreme Court appellate practice attorney who's using just Claude and mesmerized by what the AI can do within some of his use cases. And it's like, that seems to be a real threat to attorneys. When you were talking with outside counsel, with other attorneys who sort of have this impression, like, what's your response to them? Like, how do you sort of, without, AI shaming them, kind of bringing them along on the journey?
Yeah, it's a good question. One, we're not dictating to anyone or mandating you have to use this technology. I think the market will figure that out. If the technology makes law firms more competitive, that's where the work will go. But if you get that response, it's usually from someone who hasn't engaged with the technology, or they engaged a year ago and haven't used it since and don't realize the vast improvements that we've even seen within a year. The latest models are very good at complex reasoning and are applicable not just across legal, but medical and a bunch of other industries. I think it's one, a lack of knowledge, two, fear. But again, back to what we spoke about earlier, I want to pay you for your deep thinking and your strategic thinking. I'm always going to need someone to advocate, someone that has relationships, someone that can help me see around corners. We will pay for that all day. But I mean, if I look at our billing, I don't know that's what we're really paying for. We pay for a lot of production of content. And the production of that content is necessary and has been profitable in the legal industry, but it's not a high value to clients. Your 17-page memo is not of high value to most clients. They want to know, yes, no, maybe, what's my risk? And what I think and what my hope is that the technology will allow us to streamline the things that aren't of high value, and that we can actually dedicate our time to our highest and best use, which is problem solving. I think that's what lawyers want to do anyway. But if you just see yourself as, well, I'm just a discovery attorney and not, I'm a problem solver, and I'm here to actually help you get upstream on your issues and be proactive in problem solving. Yeah, maybe you should be afraid of the technology, but I don't think lawyers are like single-use lawyers. I think they're problem solvers and they have a lot of value to add. I just think the technology is going to help you add better value much quicker.
But it does change the relationship, I think, or it will change the relationship between in-house teams and your outside counsel, because I like you both just said, or you all just said, typically there were sort of two things you paid law firms for. One is the overflow work, and that the technology is clearly disrupting. And so that's that relationship is going to change. You're not going to hire first year associates to do a bunch of work that, your LLM friends can do a lot faster and a lot cheaper. And then the high level strategic thinking, like your strategic partnerships with the, senior lawyers who have seen 1,000 of these deals and therefore, know intuitively where the risk is. That too, it turns out these models are helpful with. I'm not saying that, obviously there are going to be things that a human could do in connection with a strategic AI partner that neither one alone would be as good at. So I understand that will still continue to be something you need law firms for. Do you all worry that the overflow work, which frankly is a really big part of like a law firm's business model, right? Of the leverage, leverage labor is how law firms have traditionally made money, and also how they've traditionally trained lawyers. Like, are you worried about how we get the strategic thinkers of the future if the first year associates and second and third and fourth sometimes don't have, a million emails to put in an Excel spreadsheet? Or do you think there are other ways we can train lawyers?
I think there's a plethora of ways that we can train lawyers. And I think inherently we're really bad at it just as an industry, starting in law school and then even into law firms. Having sat in a law firm, I think most of the learning I did was through shadowing. It wasn't through doc review. It wasn't through, mountains and mountains of production processing and content and, things that required likely not a legal degree to conduct. And so I do think that we're in the middle of a huge disruption when we start to think about our junior lawyers and what that actually looks like in terms of scope and services. But I think it also is going to necessitate a complete disruption on how we educate our attorneys starting in law school, as well as then what happens just in a career trajectory for, baby lawyers all the way up to
Whitney,
partners.
what you described as your training sounds a lot more like a teaching hospital. Do you think that that strikes me as a very good model for lawyers to adopt? Because I think what we have done is like, okay, you'll somehow through osmosis by, sitting at a copy machine until 2 a.m. in the morning, preparing a binder of documents that need to be signed, right? You'll somehow understand M&A, right? That's or like through a doc review project, you'll somehow just at some point it'll click and you'll go, oh, now I get litigation. And I think that's sort of been like maybe we've been trained a little bit more like large language models, just like with content thrown at us. But do you think that model should shift more to something like what you described, like a teaching hospital?
Absolutely. It was always shocking to me that, you take the bar, which is, again, wide, not deep, on a variety of different topics. And then you're expected to go into a law firm and specialize in a very niche subject matter area. Like that doesn't equate to good training, in my very humble opinion. Nor do I think, sort of extraction of key information through doc review or, writing first drafts of, memos or motions. I don't know that equips us for anything. I do think almost like a residency is a very handy way to be shadowing more senior attorneys and get that on the job experience. But going back to one of our earlier points, the incentive structure that is in the legal industry right now does not promote learning and development. It does not promote a residency type structure. It does not promote the idea that we should be investing in people's minds for purposes of future. What it promotes is short-term gains, billing in 6-minute increments, and immediate profitability. And I don't know that is a good way to equip our junior attorneys with the knowledge capital that they're going to need for the future. I also, though, in this residency sort of dynamic, have really big concerns about some of our senior attorneys training younger attorneys, largely because we see such a gap in tech competence in that population. And if we're actually thinking about technology charged lawyers, I have concerns about even a residency type program where we have someone training another person and that person themselves is not technology competent or charged in a way that is necessary in legal service delivery today.
I was just talking to a professor, a law professor at the University of Michigan about this. And the disconnect for me is that in law school, they claim to teach you how to think, and then you learn how to lawyer at your respective law firm. Um, so the law school environment is you're going to need to know this to practice, but it's not you're going to need to know how to do this. And I think the fear is, well, how do we train for an entirely different kind of landscape that we're unfamiliar with? And it's the blank page problem. Well, there's a skill set in looking at a blank page and then organizing your thoughts and putting it on that page. And if the Gen AI is just producing the first draft, don't you lose that skill set? And I actually challenge the value of that skill set. I mean, a thing that I don't know how to do, I don't know how to make fire. And that's a survival skill. But I use fire every day to make amazing meals, to like push my vehicle along the road. And I would say, the time spent saved in not having to learn how to make fire means I can be way more creative in the meals I cook. And I think you're going to see the same thing in the legal industry. The first page problem isn't really a problem unless you are teaching legal writing and that's what you get paid to do. You just need to rethink how you're going to teach legal writing.
Yeah, and Darth, a lot of people, I think, in the industry know you for technology. I've heard you speak about persuasion, and I know that's something that you study very carefully. I know that you've had unique methods going back a while about how to use persuasion at trial and other places. I've seen you make presentations, and it's like very clear, like you are a kind of trained persuader. How do you think that skill changes now in terms of like its priority? How are you thinking broadly speaking about like persuasion and its role and how it's going to change with the rise of AI?
Well, I mean, so the work I did on persuasion, the ability to get people to want what you want them to want, whether that's a judge or a jury, all that was realizing, a while ago that people that were hitting the jury box were processing information differently. And we had to recreate our arguments in a manner that resonated with how a modern juror perceived the world around them. And, for better or worse, our relationship with our smartphones, with the screens we use every day, means we're a very visual species at this point. We always have been. But so for us, it was, all right, how do we recreate oral tradition in a way that now resonates with the modern juror? The problem is exactly the same with the adoption of Gen AI. How do we get up to speed and create kind of like the next generation legal practice, leveraging the technology? So it's not radically different. If you want to know where the, benefit of working on persuasion or the art of storytelling has resonated, it's been with convincing leadership that this is something they should invest in. For us, we're lucky in that our chief policy officer and general counsel, Steve Crowley, is very forward thinking on this. So it didn't require a ton of persuasion, but where we've met resistance from a change management perspective, the ability to articulate how this is going to benefit not just the enterprise, but the individual in ways that are going to be palpable is helpful. And I do think there's an art to storytelling. Jay, I won't do it justice, but Jay has a fantastic kind of presentation on that you should all check out at some point in time. Neglecting that art means that you may not be able to persuade the people around you to come on your journey as quickly as you need them to. And it's not as, I would like them to be quicker. We need people upskilling immediately because I see what's coming down the pipeline. And with Gen AI, it's not just we are using it, our clients are using it. So instead of 3 concept cars, we may have 30 because it's easier to develop a concept car. Instead of 5 strategic plans, there may be 15 because it's easier to generate. All that's going to hit legal at some point. So if you're not preparing yourself for the increase in volume, how are you going to provide legal service? The speed at which business moves now, slow legal service is no legal service. Literally, we need an answer. We need it quickly because the enterprise needs to do something. And I just think out of necessity, we're going to have to adapt quickly.
it's interesting that it feels to me like there are so many problems in the traditional law firm model that really, well, maybe they just need some help from Gen AI, but you're right about the top of the ladder maybe not being as in tune with the technology, and that being a problem for a residency model, and then the overflow work kind of going away, causing maybe some different problems. And I assume you see law firms also like across the spectrum of adopting the technology and sort of in their change management, journeys. I assume that's right. And without naming names, if you see good models, of law firms figuring out what this is going to look like and how they can continue to be great partners to their in-house clients, what does that look like? Or if you were to go advise a law firm leader, a managing partner, about what you would do to upskill or run a change management play, what would you tell them? What would be your advice?
Yeah, I think it's two parts. First, I will note before I get into the two parts that I don't think it's law firms that are doing it well. I think it's groups within law firms that are doing it well. I think that all of these teams are on a big change management journey, our team included. And I don't think that it is ubiquitous, as Darth mentioned. I think we're headed there, but I don't know that I've seen any team that is sort of wholly adopting and using this in a way that is the most productive. I think it's teams within kind of these organizations. But I actually think that is the most effective way for kind of this two-pronged change to happen. I think the first is top-down support. I think, to Darth's point, without leadership support, without people at the top who are invested, who understand that there is a time where this investment will go on a journey, that there may be a dip in productivity until you get to kind of the end ROI state. Without that support, I think that you have very little opportunity for actually being able to see this type of adventure through to the end. And I think that you need groundswell. I think you need organic adoption. I think you need champions. And I think the best way to do that is in small groups. From the law firm side, I think embracing any clients that are willing to go on that adventure with you is imperative. And then I think it's understanding that it is going to be an investment, that this is not an easy button where you hit go and that tomorrow you are making millions of dollars on the law firm side or from the in-house side saving millions of dollars. I think it's an investment journey. And I think that as long as you have both sides of the fence participating in that journey and understanding that it's an investment and that you are really interested in longevity and a long-term partnership, that eventually you will reap those benefits, but that it is time under tension. It is an investment. It's about partnership, and it is about top-down and bottom-up support in order to holistically make the changes necessary to actually move forward. We're talking a lot with law firms these days about our journey. I think we're a little more mature in that journey than a lot of other clients. And so a lot of law firms are starting to think, oh gosh, that feels like, way in the future. I'll be retired by then for a lot of attorneys. This is not something that I need to deal with right now. And unfortunately, I think because of the pace of this technology, that this is not a distant future problem. This is a problem now, and an opportunity now as well. But I think we do need to start thinking about how this disrupts pricing, how this disrupts partnership, how this disrupts collaboration, how this disrupts the client-law firm relationship. Yeah. And I think there are very few teams that are actually on that journey so far.
And you mentioned, the top down. I think what's so, for me, the biggest change that I've seen in the last now almost 2 years is, take LawGeeks as an example. Early AI tool for contracts, and I think could theoretically have provided a lot of value in its day. But it was never going to be the case that a CLO or a managing partner of a big law firm was going to use LawGeeks. Way too bespoke, way too much training involved, and probably not responsive to their work. I don't know that many CLOs that are sitting marking up NDAs, and same with managing partners. But all of a sudden, with ChatGPT, and I think Bridget can really speak to this as an executive who I know is using AI tools on a daily basis, you now have the situation where the top executive, either in your company or in your department, can probably get just as much, if not more, value out of the current set of AI tools than their direct reports and their, and the various people who are reporting up to them. And so I think top-down support now today, it's like, if you can just, I say this to firms all the time, if you could just like get your managing partner to start playing with AI tools for something in their personal life, very quickly you're going to see them change. You're going to see their attitude toward it change, and they're going to start thinking about okay, so what does that mean? What are the implications going to be for work? It's just like, all you have to do is use it. And Bridget, you talk about this a lot, that you were hired at the AAA but hadn't quite taken over right when ChatGPT launched, which meant like you got to like experiment widely with these tools. And I think that top-down approach is really like bled into what's going on at the American Arbitration Association.
I think it's top down and bottom up. I mean, yeah, I was lucky. I had a month off in between jobs, and I spent the whole month just like learning everything I could about the tools, so that when I started, I had a plan for what we were going to do. But I think it's weird. I mean, Ethan Malik says that the companies he sees that are having the most success in their change management journeys are the ones that their C-suite is using the tools, right? And their C-suite, therefore, is bought in to how significant the change is going to be. At the same time, it's also the case, and Ethan says this as well, all of your employees are your R&D lab now, right? It's not your engineers. I mean, your engineers should also be figuring out how to code with it, because it makes them a whole lot faster, as we've seen in-house at AAA with our engineers. But it's not only your engineers, because there are some,
Right.
Case managers who are coming up with fantastic ideas because we've told them, we want you to figure out how this technology makes your job better. And so it's sort of, I feel like it's weird because it's top down and bottom up at this, that where you're going to have the most success in change management. And now Zach and I are talking to each other, and that's not what this is about. So can I turn to one point? Sorry, we can't help ourselves. And we already had a meeting this morning before we recorded this. So one more question. I know we have to let you guys get back to work, but we've been talking a lot about the supply and demand side, both the supply side and the demand side of how the market will be changing. And I think, we all agree it's changing in significant ways. I spend a lot of time thinking about the operating system where the supply and demand meet. I before this job at the AAA, I led the Michigan Supreme Court, which is a different operating system for legal, but they're both operating systems. And there aren't the same incentives usually to bring change management to the operating systems. And in fact, in the public dispute resolution system, you'll see judges just recently, last week, in the Detroit News saying, it's crazy that we still have remote hearings. Everybody should be back in court. We should be turning back to 1789 or something. I don't know. But there really isn't an incentive system to upgrade operating systems. But to me, it seems like there's going to be real interest, because there's no reason why your operating system can't be significantly upgraded by this technology, to bring efficiency to decision making, at least for some disputes, right? Like, not all disputes are created equal. They're not all right for litigation. They're not all right for arbitration. But you could imagine some repetitive disputes, maybe document-only disputes, where this technology could have a tremendous impact. At least my brain thinks so right now, and I'm curious, Darth and Whitney, if you have any reactions to that. I know it's not your job to think about that, but I'd love to hear if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, so when the judicial system is slow, like justice can't be served, society can't function. When businesses can't get decisions timely, they also are in limbo, and it is difficult to function. So for a robust society, for a robust economy, for all kinds of reasons, the ability to move at pace and speed is extremely important. And I think what you'll see is as markets tend to shift, they'll move towards places that allow for efficiency so that they also can operate. So if you are in the business of dispute resolution, you're able to provide a better, more efficient service, that is where the market's going to move, because, and that is, you'll see contractual provisions that may call for that, right, or demand that. You'll see people choosing venues that provide that. And you'll see the economic activity surrounding those legal services begin to concentrate in these areas. So I think, purely if you're looking at it from a selfish perspective, you want to have that efficiency because it's going to give you a competitive advantage, and people are going to want to take advantage of your services because you're able to give them something that they're not getting out in the market elsewhere.
I think it's also important to recognize that there are other countries and judicial systems that have
Yes.
adopted technology in a much higher pace than we have here. And so we are not first to explore this. Sometimes it might feel like we are, but certainly if we look at China as kind of a case study, there are a plethora of integrations and technology infused into their decision-making process within legal and the judicial system. And certainly, maybe perhaps not a model case study, but an opportunity for us to learn and to make changes and to pivot slightly in order to accommodate for, things that are more appropriate for our judicial system and certainly, legal regulatory framework. But it is not new, meaning it is not something that has not been done. And so I think it's a little too presumptuous to think that we know best, and this historical way that we have always done things is the way that it should be, because there are plenty of other places that are exploring next generation versions of their judicial system and having some success with that as well.
Yeah, and I think it comes back to the point that Darth made before is we're going to see business operating at exponential speed. It's going to mean higher volume. And the reason we're going to adopt AI may not be because we want to, but because we just have to. Right. And I think this is something that, you mentioned when it's a lot less expensive to draw up documents to file a dispute, you're going to see more disputes. I think, this is something that we think a lot about at the American Arbitration Association is we think there's going to be a huge rise in the number of disputes filed or followed up on. WebMD didn't lead to less people going to the doctor. It didn't replace the doctor. Actually, it increased the number of doctor visits. So I think we're probably going to see something similar with AI. So I think, it's very interesting to think about, to see how in-house counsel are thinking about dispute resolution and potentially, ultimately leaning on either AI-powered or AI-based decision-making. So super interesting to talk to the both of you. Thank you so much for giving us a kind of like snapshot of what's going on in-house, and we really appreciate your time.
Thank you
Great
for
to
having
see
us.
you both. Yeah, thank you.
You too.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the AAAi podcast. Please consider leaving us a rating and review on your favorite podcasting platform. And don't forget to follow and subscribe so that you never miss an episode.